We're talking about the Museum Council, and the Museum Council insists that Ministry of Culture of Ukraine introduces competitive selection of museum managers, and the speakers are Ludmila Gubianuri, Deputy Head of the Museum Council and Directorate of the Mykhailo Bulhkaov Memorial Museum, and Vladislav Pioro, who is member of the Museum Council and director of the NGO Ukrainian Center for Museum Development. Good afternoon, everybody. I think that it is very important to tell that Museum Council is a permanent advisory board whose aim is to provide consultation. It was created in 2012, and our Museum Council was in such composition for a year now. Generally speaking, the Museum Council invites museum workers from all museums of Ukraine, and we have representatives from Dnipropetrovsk, Donetsk, Chernihiv, Lviv, and of course Kiev, Odessa as well. This is important because we cannot physically meet when we want. This has to be an official invitation. Yes, we did create a page of the Museum Council, but we do meet when we are invited by the Ministry of Culture, and the last time we met was the 23rd of January last year, and this was the joint sitting of our Museum Council and the International Council of Museums, and during this sitting that lasted for almost 5 hours, representatives of the Ministry of Culture, we had First Deputy Minister Igor Lychovy and Head of the Department of the Museum Business Affairs, and also his First Deputy. We have the decisions of this Museum Council sitting, 12 points, but I of course won't read them all out. All those recommendations, I'll dwell on what pertains to our today's meeting. This is point 9, which said before April 2015, work with elaborate the order of organizing selective competition or competitive selection of candidates for the directors of museums, and the time is running out. We haven't been invited even for once. That's why we decided to create an initiative group and to work out, to elaborate our own resolution. You know what were the so-called loud appointments that led to scandals in the museum sphere, and so the Museum Council, together with Vasily Roshko, who's been with us as a chief legal advisor, so we developed a draft, after which we suggested that this draft is discussed. This is an open document, and after this, of course, we have the right to pass it on, to submit it to the Ministry of Culture, who have the right to bestow an official status on it. You probably know that there were letters from ICOM and COMOS, and they've written about the competition, and we heard the answer from the Ministry of Culture that says that allegedly people who have written those letters want to get the former authorities back, as we are allegedly adherents of those people who were dismissed. But I emphasize that there's not a single word about any personalities in our letters, because it's all about museums. And when this contest, for instance, was introduced, if it were introduced, if there were competition, then, for instance, in Saint Sophia Cathedral, the former director could take part, and the one who was appointed recently. And if they say that there are court claims against this person, then according to our draft, such a person could not take part in our contest, and we would avoid a lot of scandals. This is a very important issue. You have probably read the address of Yuri Lutsenko today, and you know this is not just sad for people and offends those people who take part in international COMUS and ICOM organizations associated with UNESCO and members of the Museum Council. This is not about those people. I would like one of the best consultants and specialists in museum business, Mr. Pioro, to tell us about the project. Yes, I would like to emphasize that a consolidated position of the most members of the Museum Council is that we do not talk about specific persons, so I call upon everyone to abstain from speculations. We categorically emphasize that we are not talking about specific people, but starting from 2012, starting from the time when there was a first massive wave of dismissals of directors of museums during Mr. Kulinyak's reign as a minister. So since then, we insist that there should be a transparent competitive system as a safeguard against this non-transparent personnel policy, and as a guarantee of the development of the institution, as a guarantee that the best candidates are selected. So now we are made to make this public again, because in December in 2014, the new Museum Council has called upon the Ministry of Culture to introduce the new competitive selection of managers of museums, but this initiative was ignored again. We were not just left without any public discussion. I am not even mentioning the work of on the specific normative basis, legal basis, but we saw a series of appointments. Again, I categorically warn here that we do not talk about the persons. I respect many of those who were appointed as specialists, but the specific actions of the Ministry of Culture, in essence, tell us more about their real intentions than any declarations. So, respectively, the matter is that you can use the argument that a museum cannot work without a director, that their term of contract has finished, that many of them were past their term of contract, but if the Ministry of Culture is really oriented towards the introduction of a competitive procedure, then they can, of course, appoint someone as acting director or a person who would have a limited contract term. However, at the moment we have contracts being signed for a maximally possible term, which means that it really tells us more about the actions of the Ministry of Culture, tell us more about their intentions than any words that we hear from them. So we organized as a museum council, and we first of all developed our proposals and submitted them to the committee of the Parliament of Ukraine. I thank here Ms. Irina Podolak, who helps us, but it is too little to expect only the changes to the instructions and resolutions of the ministry. We need some legal document that would regulate this. So our next step was that we drafted the norms of selecting directors of museums. We think that this draft does provide for revolutionary changes that will become a guarantee of the reforming of the personnel policy in museum sphere, like the principles of transparency, efficiency of choice, and of course which is the trust in the results of the contest. That's why very important is the mechanism of formation of the context commission. What we tried to do previously during some attempts to introduce the competitive basis were based on the one-person decision of the Ministry of Culture about who should be on the list. We all suggest that there should be a proportional representation when, for instance, some people are suggested by the Ministry of Culture, then the same number is suggested by the working collective, and then the professional public does. And this will provide for a high level of trust. And of course, it is very important that they should not only recommend, but in essence, that it should be obligatory to sign the contract after the Commission selects the most expert and responsible person. Then a contract for 5 years is concluded with this person. So after having worked this document out, now we are talking about it to the experts of the Museum Council, and today we are submitting it to a broad public discussion. It's already published on the Muzeyny Prostor web portal. We are ready to systematize and work with all the remarks of the professional community, and we hope that we will be able to pass it on to the Ministry of Justice. And so this is what we wanted to say, and we will be grateful for your questions. Any questions? Thank you very much. We were glad to see you here. Please come again and tell us about the progress in this sphere. So today our working day is finished, and the schedule for tomorrow will be on our site before the